All right, here we go. Today, we're going to be reviewing multiplication and division. So first thing we want to recall is that multiplication is repeated addition. For example, if I'm multiplying 2 times 5, or 2 times 6, that means I'm going to add 2 6s. I can draw a bar model for that, and 6 plus 6 is 12. And it works the same with negative numbers. 4 times negative 3 means I'm going to add 4 negative 3s. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, I can draw a bar model. 1, 2, 3, 4. Altogether, we have 12 negatives. So that's a value of negative 12. Now, we could say that, we could say that division is repeated subtraction, but it's actually more useful to think about it as separating something into equal groups. So if I'm doing 16 divided by 2, by the way, I like to do division, write division as with a fraction. So this is 16 divided by 2. So I'm going to take 16 positives and divide them equally into 2 groups. And here's how I do it equally. I put 1 for you and 1 for me. 1 for you and 1 for me. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So if I take 16 positives and divide them equally into 2 groups, I have 8 positives in each group. And it works the same with negatives. If I do a negative 21 divided equally into 3 groups, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. And here you can see I have 7 negatives in each group, so that's a negative 7. And this one here especially helps us understand that when we have a negative number divided by a positive number, the quotient will be negative. And that will always be true, because if we're taking a bunch of negatives and we're dividing them into equal groups, we're going to have negatives in each group. So let's review the rules. So we looked at the rules for multiplication yesterday. Positive times a positive obviously is positive, but a negative times a negative is also positive. And the rules for division are actually the same. So a positive divided by a positive, obviously positive, and a negative divided by a negative, also positive. So in general, let's add a word to here. So when the two signs of a multiplication or division are the same, the product multiplication or quotient division is going to be positive. I want to add the word to here because this only works when we're looking at 2 numbers being multiplied or divided. If we had 3 numbers, it doesn't quite work as well. So when the 2 numbers being multiplied or divided are the same, the product or quotient is always positive. Now, we also reviewed that a positive times a negative is negative, and we saw that on the previous one. We had 4 times negative 3, and that gave us 12 negatives. And I can just change the order of that. Negative 3 times positive 4 is also going to be a negative. And it works the same for division. We just saw that a negative divided by a positive is negative, but so is a positive divided by a negative. So again, the rules for multiplication and division are the same. So once again, when the 2 signs are different, then the product or quotient will be negative. So if we look at a multiplication or division, just 2 numbers at a time, signs are the same, positive, signs are different, negative. So let's try some examples. So I'm going to multiply a negative times a negative, so that gives me a positive. And then to find 9 times 6 in my multiplication table, I'm going to look at the 9 row and the 6 column and that gives me 54. So please circle the 54. So a negative 9 times a negative 6 is a positive 54. In the same way, a negative times a positive gives me a negative. And 7 row, 6 column is 42. Now, division, I can also use my multiplication for division. I know you all knew how to multiply, but how do you divide? So in this case, I'm doing negative 72 divided by 8. It's a negative divided by a positive, so that's going to be negative. And then I'm going to look in my multiplication table for the 8 at the 8 row. And in the 8 row, I'm going to look for the number 72 right here. So please circle the 72 in the 8 row. If I go up to the top column, I can see that the quotient is 9. Again, a negative divided by a negative is positive. And in this case, I'm going to look at the 4 row, because I'm dividing by 4. And in the 4 row, I'm going to find the 36. And the quotient is also, again, 9. All right, so we can practice multiplication, division, and addition using something called diamond problems that we've seen already this week. So the top of each diamond is the product of the sides. And let's draw an arrow. Circle the word product, draw an arrow. The product is the result when we multiply. And the bottom is the sum. Circle the word sum and draw a little line. The sum is the result when we add. So let's do the multiplications first. So I'm going to bring in my multiplication table. You don't need it. You can look at the previous page. Excuse me. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply negative 8 times positive 7. Negative times a positive is negative. 8 times 7 is 56. And that's it. Let's do negative 9 times negative 7. Negative times a negative is positive. And 9 times 7 is 63. And now let's add those. I draw a bar for the negative 8 and a bar for the positive 7. I make 7 zero pairs. Now, we're having a quiz on this. In your quiz, you must show inside the 0 there should be a positive number and its opposite, negative number. So in this case, positive 7, negative 7. You need to have 2 numbers inside the 0. They need to be opposites, positive on top, negative on the bottom. That's how we make 0 pairs. Now I want to figure out what goes here. So I'm going to take these 8 negatives, subtract off the 7 negatives I put on the left, and that leaves me 1 negative to go on the right. So I'm going to lightly cross off that negative 8, and my value is negative 1. Let's try this one. Negative 9 plus negative 7. In this case, I'm going to combine the 2 bars into a long bar, so I have 9 negatives plus 7 negatives is 16 negatives, negative 16. All right, let me move the multiplication table. And what's the biggest difference for these 2 problems? Well, the biggest difference is I don't know the right side. But the top is still the product of the sides. So I am not going to multiply negative 3 times negative 24. I want to know negative 3 times what is negative 24. So to figure that out, I'm going to divide. Negative 24 divided by negative 3. So a negative divided by a negative is positive. And I'm going to divide by 3. So let me look at the 3 row. Here's the 24. So negative 24 divided by 3 is positive 8. Here I'm going to divide by positive divided by a negative is negative. And let's look in the 6th row, find the 24. There it is. So positive 24 divided by negative 6 is negative 4. Now I can go back and check these. Negative times positive is negative, 3 times 8 is 24. Negative times negative is positive, 6 times 4 is 24. So when I divide, I should go back and check that by multiplying. And then let's do the bar model for those. So negative 3 plus positive 8, I'm going to make 3 zero pairs, and 8 positives for this long bar, minus 3 positives leaves 5 positives. So I put a 5 here and here. And one more, negative 6 plus negative 4. Let's combine those bars. 6 negatives plus 4 negatives is 10 negatives. And that's it. Okay. All right. So let's do some practice, and let's also expand by looking at multiplying and dividing by powers of 10. So when we multiply by powers of 10, we move the decimal point to the right, which makes the numbers larger, or we move the decimal point to the left, which makes the number smaller. And I recommend you don't worry about the right and left, just always think about, is this number going to get bigger, larger, or smaller? Here's what I mean. We're going to do 71 times 1,000. So first thing I want you to notice is that there's 3 zeros in 1,000 has 3 zeros. That means we're going to move the decimal point 3 places. So I'm going to start with 70. Oh, and because I'm multiplying by 1,000, the number's going to get larger. To make a number larger, I move the decimal point that way. So let's start with the 71. The decimal point is here at the end of the 71. So from there, I'm going to move 1, 2, 3 places, and here's my new decimal point. Anytime I have this empty little move, I have to fill that in with a 0. So let's rewrite the number 71,000. So 71 times 1,000 is 71,000, which makes a lot of sense. It can work with numbers that have a decimal point in the middle. So I'm going to do 3.4 times 100. So I'm going to move, 100 has 2 zeros, so I'm going to move the decimal point 2 places. And again, I'm multiplying by 100, so the number is going to get larger, so we will move that way. So I'm going to start with the 3.4. The decimal point is here, and I'm going to move it 1, 2 places, so the decimal point is going to move to there. In this case, because I moved past the 4, I only need 1 extra 0. And so my new value is 340. Now that should make sense, because 3 times 100 is 300. So 3 4/10 times 100 is 340. Should make sense. In this case, I'm dividing by 10. So 10 has 1 0. I'm only going to move the decimal point 1 place. And because I'm dividing by 10, it's going to get smaller. So when a number gets smaller, I move the decimal point that way. So I'm going to start with 82,000. Don't put the comma. Again, the decimal point is here at the end, and I'm going to move it 1 place to make it smaller. So that gives me 8,200. Finally, I have 613 divided by 100. Again, 100 has 2 zeros, so we're going to move the decimal point 2 places. And because we're dividing by 100, it's going to get smaller. And so we're going to start with 613, move the decimal point from the end 1, 2 places. And so my new value is 6 13 hundredths, or 6.13. So let's try to formalize this. Okay, anytime I'm multiplying or dividing by a number that has a power of 10, I can follow these steps. And we're going to formalize it here, and then we'll kind of streamline it. So the first thing I need to do is to decompose the number that has the power of 10. So in this case, 800 has a power of 10. So that's what I'm going to decompose. So I'm going to copy the -6, but I'm going to decompose 800 into 8 times 100. So this is a number times a power of 10. Then I'm going to do my multiplication or division with the other numbers. So that means not the power of 10. So -6 times 8, that's -48. And I'm going to copy the times 100. Okay, so I simplified -6 times 8. And now I'm going to multiply or divide. So I have 100 has 2 zeros, so I'm going to move my decimal point 2 places to make the number larger. So I'll start with -48, move the decimal point 2 places, and that gives me -4,800. Let's rewrite it, and that's my final result. So let's practice this 3 more times. Now, okay, so let's start with this first one. We're going to decompose 50 into 5 times 10, and we're going to decompose -40 into -4 times 10. Then we multiply 5 times -4 is -20, and then we're going to move the decimal point 1 extra place for this 0, another extra place for this 0, so that's going to add 2 extra zeros. All right, in this case, if I look at my multiplication table, I see that 30 is a multiple of 6. So I'm going to decompose -300 into -30 times 10. There's just 1 extra 0 there. So then I'm going to do -30 divided by 6. That's -5. And then I have this 1 extra 0. So I'm going to multiply that by 10. So I get -50. Okay? -30, maybe I should write this like this. So it's -30 times 10 divided by 6. So that gives me -5 times 10, which is -50. All right, and then we're going to do this one in kind of a similar way. 14 divided by -200. So I'm going to decompose that -200 into -2 times 100. And I'm going to start by doing the 14 divided by -2. So that's -7. And I'm still dividing by 100. So I'm dividing by 100, so I'm going to move the decimal point 2 places to make the number smaller. So I started here at 7, 1, 2, so my new decimal point is there. We like to add a 0 in front, and remember that it's negative. Okay, so -7 divided by 100 is -700ths. Now, if you think about dollars and cents, you think about 1 cent is 1/100th of a dollar. So 7 cents is 7/100ths of a dollar. So actually, if you know dollars and cents, then you actually know hundredths really well. Let's do our additions and we'll be finished. Let's go back over here. So I have a +50 plus a -40. I'm going to make 40 zero pairs. 50 positives minus 40 positives is 10 positives. Let's kind of get that out of the way. All right. Next, +6 plus -50. 6 zero pairs. 50 negatives minus 6 negatives is 44 negatives. And then this one looks the hardest, but it's actually the easiest. I have negative 200 plus negative 7. So if you think about money, a negative would mean that I owe some money. So let's say I owe Javier $200. I owe Nora 7 cents. So altogether, I owe $200.07. All right, and that's our review for multiplication and division, including powers of 10.